what do you believe is the main cause that is threatening all these fish, like the bigger fish and the sharks? You said they're like all gone.
It's the factory fishing operations, and there are a number of countries that do factory fishing. And when I say factory fishing, usually it entails a mothership and then several smaller fishing vessels attached to that, where the mothership is the factory. And the problem here is the indiscriminate taking of fish. They'll just go out and clean an entire area. Some of the biggest culprits have been the Chinese, Japanese fishing fleets, the Russian fishing fleets. To some degree, not fishing, but the whaling fleets from Norway and Japan. They're very limited in terms of the number of animals that they're taking, but it's taking from a population that is not very healthy. The numbers aren't there necessarily to sustain those species. Prime example of this is the fishing fleets of Ireland, of Western Ireland, for example. They used to do cod fishing runs out into the North Atlantic, between Canada and Ireland. And they had done that for generations. Now the cod populations aren't there. And what has happened to the fishing villages of Ireland? All those people no longer fish. They've had to go into other industries. And in Ireland, that's tough because there aren't a whole lot of choices for them. If they have the education, the background, wherewithal, there's fairly good tech industry in Ireland. But you spend your lifetime on a fishing boat, that's not necessarily what you're going to be good at. So it causes a lot of problems when you eliminate an entire sector of your society in terms of what people do for a livelihood. What are they going to be able to do? It has greater impact in these small islands in the Indo-Pacific area. It's just there aren't the choices for people to go into other areas. I guess a good example too would be the situation in Somalia. When you don't have fishing, what do you do?
And so, you're saying that overfishing, basically, that's what you're saying?
It's overfishing and indiscriminate. It's taking everything. They go in with the types of nets that they use, in many instances, are designed to just scrape along the bottom of the ocean. It destroys everything. And it takes everything. Nothing is left behind. And once it's all brought up to the surface, then they'll pick out the things that they want and they trash the rest. So all these animals are just thrown back in, not alive, but certainly not adding to the ecosystem because everything's gone. So it's that sort of indiscriminate carnage that is causing a big problem, I believe, with the ecosystems throughout the world. The way things are being done, at some point in time, there will be no more fish. No fish large enough for human consumption. The past few years, it's very rare for me to find large fish. When I talk about large fish, I mean really healthy, big, 1 meter plus size fish. For the most part, they're gone. They've been fished out. You find a lot of smaller fish, but the large, mature fish are just not there. And this has a number of different problems for the ocean's ecosystems, but also for human situations, because people are limited as to what they can eat now. Obviously, these small villages on a number of the islands throughout the Pacific, South Pacific, their economy, their livelihood, how they exist is based on fishing. And when you're stuck in a situation where you no longer have the large fish populations or the larger fish, now you're really jeopardized in terms of how you can sustain yourself. So it's a two-edged sword on that, in terms of it's not healthy for the reefs, and it's not healthy for the local populations. I read about a report from a guy a sailor, and he was sailing from New Zealand to Japan. And he had done that trip, I believe, 30 years ago. And he did it again last year. And he said the biggest difference in the 30 years between trips, this trip last year was the lack of birds. There were no birds. Whereas on his first trip, there were always birds around his boat, but there were always birds because there was always food for them. Now, no birds, which means no food.